Hello and welcome to Mystic Chat. I'm so excited today. We have the fabulous, amazing Cyndi Brannen here today, and I can't tell you how excited I am. I've been looking forward to the show for the last 2 weeks. My name is Chris Allaun. Um, I am a published author, a ordained minister with the Fellowship of the Phoenix. And now I'm a podcaster and all that things now too. I would like to introduce my co-host, Laura Gonzalez. Laura Gonzalez, how are
Hi,
you?
everybody. Hi, my name is Laura Gonzalez, and I am very happy to be here with you today. I'm also a podcaster, and I'm a communicator. I've been podcasting for a long, long time. And suddenly, because Chris Allaun, now I'm also a video blogger. So here we are. And a little bit of my background, I'm a witch, I'm a priestess of the goddess, I'm a member and training minister and training for Circle Sanctuary, and I'm also a professional witch for hire. So I'm a tarot reader and a healer, and I'm very happy to be here with you. And of course, I will give it back to you, Chris, but no, I'm gonna steal it. Cyndi, for those who live under a rock and don't know you, can you please introduce yourself?
Well, some of us like it here under our rocks, right? Like, we're witches. We like the dark, kind of damp, rocky spaces where you find all those treasures. So if you don't know who I am, I'm Cyndi Brannen, author of Keeping Her Keys, podcaster as Keeping Her Keys, and you can find out more about my work on keepingherkeys.com. I also have a private network on Mighty Networks that's known as the Keeping Her Keys Coven. And when I'm done talking, myself, or maybe someone who's here can grab the link, because we're happy to share a free month's membership with anyone who wants to see what the coven is all about. I am a priestess of Hekate, a seeker of the mysteries, a practitioner of true medicine, and doing my best to live a truly magical life here in the rural areas of Nova Scotia on the Atlantic coast.
That's awesome. So I have two questions for you. The first question is, isn't it always cold there, like all the time?
No.
No.
No. Today it's I think it's about 33 degrees, which in Fahrenheit it would be, I don't know, 90 something.
Wow. Crap.
And it actually rarely goes below freezing here in the winter.
Really? I should go there and hang out with you. Okay, so my first question is, how did you start this path with Hekate? How did that all come about?
Let's all take a breath. Get into our sitting bones. Oh, it's a story. So I had been a member of the Fellowship of Isis, and seeking, learning and seeking as you do the magic, medicine, and mystery of the deeper world. And had long time been very close to Artemis and Persephone. And one night I was going through a really difficult time in my life, and I was, of all things, performing the ritual of folding laundry. And I heard a really still voice in my head that said, "It's time." And there was no like brouhaha, there was no fireworks or flames. I knew intuitively in my soul that it was Hekate, even though at the time I was only kind of remotely aware of her. So this is, say, 15 years ago now. So, like, just if you were involved in witchcraft and kind of ran in pagan circles, you kind of knew who Hekate was. But I didn't know much about her. So she said it was time. And I made her and myself a pledge to show up in my own life. And now, all these years later, here we all are.
That's amazing. I have to say I kind of had a similar experience because I honor Diana, Artemis, and I have since like the year 1998 or something like that. And I've always had Hekate in my house. I've always had a small shrine for her, but in the last like 5 years, she basically said the same thing, like, okay, you need to really honor me if you're if we're gonna do the type of work that we do, you know. So I wonder if she does that to everyone, just kind of subtle and just say, hey, here I am, you know. Um, so, of course, I think everyone here has read your books. One of the things I really appreciated and I noticed about how your writing style is that it's very thorough, but it's also very to the point. You know, can you talk about your writing style a little bit and just like your thought process behind how you deliver her teachings and things?
Oh, that's a fabulous question, and I appreciate you asking it. Because right now, for the last, say, 3 weeks, maybe a bit longer, I've been kind of in the stage, you know, like you're an author, so you know, you go through the stage where the book is kind of off in the distance, if you will. The torches are shining in the direction of a book, and I have ideas, you know, this book might be this. But for the last 3 weeks, I've been really in presence. I view my books, same as with the courses I teach, or even rituals that I've created. I view them as spirits, as entities onto themselves. And it's my work to get to know them and to do the best to share their medicine with everyone else. You know, that I am a conduit. I'm a divine mediator, much in the same way, you know, like if we look at the story of, you know, Hekate, Persephone, and Demeter, you know, Hekate was the mediator, right? Like she was the mediator in various ways in that myth. And that's how I see myself. Like I'm the mediator between what needs to be shared and whatever exists as spirit. So I spend a lot of time, I guess, like I would say in communion, because it is very spiritual to me, in communion with, you know, when I get to know that book. So I am in the very beginning stages, and I do, you know, of getting to know that book. And there's a lot of research, you know, that goes on, and, you know, revisiting. I've been listening to Joseph Campbell's recorded speeches for the last, to get back into touch with, there's different things I know that are the medicine in this book that I wanted to revisit some of his work. So you know, so that's my process. Is the book itself, once it's ready to start becoming like a book, it takes about a year, you know, once it's ready. You know, it's like the gestation period, right? And then there's like the birth process, which is the actual writing. And then, you know, birth, like it has pains, and it goes like sometimes it goes on and on.
The pains of birth, which I will never understand, but yeah.
So yeah, and I kind of have a funny thing I do. I'll share this with everyone here if I can find it quickly. So once I get, and I, you know, once I'm like, this is the book, I make basically vision sheets, like almost of the different, like, and this can change drastically. So right now I kind of have these big themes like the descent, the choice, the shadow, the river, talking about Acheron, the cleansing, the Boroforba, the ruler, and so on. So I use a lot. I have this kind of process of, you know, making like these sheets, and that becomes like a spell, you know, because for me, magic is embedded in what we do. First of all, writing is magic. And then, you know, I always have other layers of intentional magic and work with it. You know, there's a really funny story that, I couldn't sell the Keeping Your Keys book to anybody. It was rejected by absolutely everyone.
Wait,
So if you
wait,
almost
what?
feel courage, let me tell you, that book was rejected by everyone, and I have sold thousands of copies of that
I
book.
know you have. I keep up with that. I keep up with you. Absolutely.
So stay true to whatever is true to you, and eventually the key will unlock the way, right? So there was a funny story. So I finally sold it to Moon Books, and I had the pages, like an early draft that I'd printed out, and I burnt it in the fire pit on my property. And I wrote a little article about burning these pages of the book as a form of magic, of a releasing spell to bless this spell. And the smoke brought it out into the world. And it's funny that this was rare. Some people were really upset by me burning those pages.
Interesting.
And I think it's really, I've got the new book coming out, Entering Hecate's Garden, and it's a very generative book. It's not a book about burning away. So my spell work in terms of blessing it and sending out into the world has been a little bit different. I smashed clay pots and made a shrine out of the shards in the woods at my little place I have in the woods, with sigils of Medea and Hekate and Circe on it. So
Oh, God.
to me, to launch something into the woods, into the world, there's always a lot of magic associated with whatever I do. So yeah, so that to me is like very embedded in my writing process. And then there's also like laying on the floor and crying, but we won't talk too much.
So, okay, so I totally understand the whole thing about farming out your book and getting rejected, because my first book, Underworld, since I had four the publishers basically say nobody cares about that subject, and I know now, well, that's not true. And so one of the things I really liked about what you do, because a lot of people honor Hecate, tons of people, and I almost feel like she's having either a revival, or maybe a lot of those people who were silent aren't so much silent anymore, because everywhere I go, it's all about Hecate, and it's great and it's inspiring and makes me happy. With that being said, I've noticed, I'm gay myself. I've noticed that Hecate has an enormously huge gay following. And uh, what is your take on that? Like, why do you think the LGBTQ really gravitate towards her?
Well, I have, so I've, because I've been so privileged to really get to know and be in the presence of people who are, on the LGBTQIA plus, everyone, everyone who is other than cisgendered, heteronormative. I've been so privileged to call those people my students and my friends and my allies. So I've kind of collected a lot of data on this, because I am, I bring, my former career in health research with me. So I'm always the observer. I'm always like casually like extrapolating themes from experiences. The thing I would say is that, yes, indeed, Hecate seems to be having a revival, which is interesting. And she does call to the marginalized, those traditionally eschewed by the patriarchy.
Mm.
And she calls loud and hard sometimes, right? And I know a lot of you can relate to that. It's a good call, but sometimes it is like, it comes as a quiet knowing, but what happens afterwards is a revolution. It's like a quiet revolution. And I believe that is because she's so associated with the marginalized. And if we look at even like the ancient stories describing her horde, her horde was very much comprised of those that were rejected by society for one reason or another. Unwed mothers, people who sexuality wasn't accepted, and so on, and so on and so on. So it is her archetypal primordial force, that she is a great mother goddess, but she favors the marginalized, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely.
Because we're more connected to the magic, because we are the rule benders, right? We're the rule benders, we're the sharecroppers, we're the whistleblowers, we're the ones who are, trying to find our own power. And that's incredibly Hecatean, whether you look at like ancient myths or contemporary themes emerging from practitioners like all of us here.
Mm-hmm. I have a question to ask, of course, because in Latin America, I'm from Mexico. I'm from Mexico City. I've been in Chicago for 22 years, but I'm from Mexico. And I know a lot of people in Central, South America, Mexico, and other Latin American people in the United States that work with Hecate and worship her and all of that. But I want to know your point of view into why some people use, and I use big air quotes, use her for revenge or to scare other people, or I don't know if they haven't understand who Hecate is, or if that is a good way to work with Hecate into working as revenge.
So thank you for asking this question. This is a really great question to discuss, isn't it? Like to talk about this. And not too long ago, I teach this master course at Hekate and Witchcraft. We got into it a little bit about like, is there a false Hecate? And what is going on with the people, I think the kind of people that you're talking about, Laura. And, like just different versions, like, and like, for example, for what we might consider, nasty magic, or inappropriate magic, or even like,
Unethical?
Unethical, like this is such a big discussion, right? Like, oh, we're just layers and layers to this discussion. So, it's one of those things that's just a really interesting thing to contemplate, like, so if someone is very unethical, and mean-spirited, I would say, and not right-minded about their magic, then are they actually involved with Hecate? Like you said, do they actually even know who she is? And, I can't speak for other people, but from my observation, they don't know who she is, and they don't know what they're doing. And it's not, as a result, their magic is ineffective. I would say that. Does it, and then we get into the whole subject of what's ethical and what's unethical. In my teaching, I say, like all magic has a time and place.
Mm-hmm.
If someone has hurt you and it's highly likely they're going to continue to hurt you or other people, then what some might consider baneful magic, such as bindings or banishings, I think that's very ethical. I think if you're just being kind of petty and mean-spirited because, you want to just exact revenge on, someone who bumped into your car or something, then, I think that's just going to, I do think having that mentality, being in the position of fear and choosing, and not striving to grow and become more true to your path, that I think, the boomerang effect really is real. Like if you go into those spells and magic like that, it will really come back at you. If you go into any kind of magic, for healing, and sometimes healing is cursing someone, right? So sometimes they need to be stopped. And if you go into it with that mentality, then you're going to attract different spirits, whether it's Hecate or other spirits you work with. And you're not going to get yourself in more trouble because, if you are in the zone of being petty and feeble-minded and fearful, and inappropriately vengeful, then it's going to just ultimately cause more trouble for you than it would ever alleviate.
And the reason why I really wanted to ask you this is because a lot of people might be interested in working with her, getting to know her, etc. And they shy away from her because they're afraid, because they have seen other people saying like, oh, don't do anything to me because Hecate's on my corner and she's going to get you. I want to ask a second question, Chris. I'm sorry. But since she's here, I have to take, that's how I learn. Sorry. That's why you folks need to do podcasts and video blogs. So you can
so you can have your own show.
So you can interview cool people. So by hearing you talking, Cyndi, you very much abide by my rule, which is you're a witch, act like one. It seems to me like you were acting like a witch all day, 24/7. So this goes into a little bit of a personal preference. A, do you consider that everything that you do is magic? I do, but this is me, so I want to know your opinion. And B, do you share your day and your daily magical activities with Hekate only, or are there others?
Ooh, that's a good question. All right, so I believe that I have a little poem. It's actually going to be in the third book, but in the network, we've been kind of working with this poem for the last month or so, and it is, my body is the temple, my mind is the altar, and my soul is the shrine upon it. My life is the ritual.
Awesome. Yeah.
And that, that is it for me. And curiously, I had to go on a road trip with my son who's 15 the other day, and we were talking about being more present in the moment. And, we were talking about intentions and how to be present in the moment. And because he's very ambitious, he's very forward thinking right now, where it's his 15-year-old self, right? And he said, well, it sounds very Buddhist to me. And I said, well, it's not very Buddhist. Like the Buddhists didn't own the rights to being present in the moment. And I think that is, the epitome of being a magical being, is that you are present and engaged in the moment, because that is where so much occurs. And if we're always like, we're chasing Hekate, or we're chasing this, or we're doing this, we're so busy chasing, and instead of paying attention, we're seeking attention. Right?
That's a good point. That's a very good point.
And so I believe that there are magical things. If we're not present in the moment and doing that kind of just being with the moment, we miss like the animal medicine signs that come to us. We don't notice a certain thought that seems to pop in our head out of nowhere, apropos of nothing, that is probably a message from the deeper world. So I think that's really, to me, like, to live a magical life is really just the secret to it, and that we become the ritual, whether it's our daily tarot card pull, whether we're brushing our teeth. There's, all of that can be lived with intention and purpose, which to me is magic. And also we can be in the moment, so we can see those little things that happen. Don't you think that's such a thing that happens, though? Like,
absolutely.
I mean, like in your work, Laura, in particular, I'm sure people come to you and they want all these big answers. And it's like, the answers are right in front of you, but you're so convinced the answer has to come in this package, you're ignoring the fact that the answer is already in front of you in a different package.
Yeah. I actually tell my clients, I'm not here for your future. I'm here for your past and your present. Mm-hmm. Because that's what you want to work in, is in your present. And then see a tendency towards a possibility of the future, but you build that. You build that. And I totally agree that when you lead a magical life, everything you do is magic. Everything. you know, and it's not in a pious way of, oh, I'm not gonna laugh or I'm not gonna get drunk or whatever, because that's not according to my religion, but it's actually because living at the moment, surely
Right.
the witch's religion, you know, if there's one.
If there is one, you know,
Yeah.
and you're right, it's not like, it's not being inflated, like you know, thinking that we're so pious and above the fray of everyday life. It's that we're like embedded in everyday life.
Yes.
You know, we're not just casually passing through.
Right.
Right. You have, sorry, what you're gonna say something, Chris?
I was gonna say, I'm listening to you. You talk about, you know, we think about the past, we think about the future, we think about Hekate, and you know, one of her titles is the Gods of the Crossroads. And what is the crossroad? Is where are we exactly now? Where are all these where are they all for combining at in meeting? Interesting fact in astrophysics, they actually believe that events from the past affect our present, and then events from the future also affect our present. So I'm wondering how much power, and she, you know, she has her keys, and she unlocks the gates and um, unlocks the gates. I wonder how much power or how much we or she could teach us about those energies of like for quantum physics, astrophysics, and things like that. But I'm a geek, and that's where my head goes. So,
I love having those conversations too about, you know, how this is all connected. And I'd love to talk about that. Laura, I think there was a part 2 to your question that was about other goddesses or deities.
Yeah.
I am still involved with our Artemis or Diana, however, then always will be. I have a deep affection, almost like, you know, she was my first goddess, my first love as a teenager. And then Persephone will always be very dear to me. And then Medea and Circe, Hecate's daughters, are very, very important and dear to me, and like companions, you know, and teachers that are companion teachers. And I have this enduring situation with Mercury, Hermes.
curious, what's the situation?
I think if you have an enduring situation with Mercury or Hermes, you know exactly what I mean by situation. It's a situation.
Yeah. That is wonderful.
And I also have a deep, deep affection for Aries and Mars.
Beautiful. You have very good company. I am.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, I am. As you saw by my reaction, I love Mercury. Mercury and Fortuna are my people, but Mercury is like, you're mine. But there's also an aspect of Hecate as a communicator, isn't she? Can you tell us a little bit about her? Sorry, Chris.
That's okay. I do have a question.
Astrophysics, because I have some thoughts. So it's interesting because, you know, in the mythology, sometimes Hecate and Hermes are coupled up. And in some of the myths, you know, they're like consorts. And then of course in the whole Persephone cycle, you know, Hermes was very much involved in the negotiations and the whole process. So they're very close. And there's a reference, I forget exactly where it comes from. It might be the Greek magical papyri, where the practitioner is doing a spell and they actually put it together. So it becomes Hecames.
Really?
Yep. And I sometimes jokingly also say Hermicate.
I love it.
So
I just looking to say they have so many similar attributes, you know?
they really do, right? And, you know, like a lot of times we forget about Hermes' role as like psychopomp and, you know, like and you know, a wayfinder for lost souls back and forth to the underworld. And you know, at the very least, they would have had to pass themselves on the road,
Hey, how are you?
fighting these souls back and forth, you know, because you know they had that role. So, and they were both chthonic or chthonic, depending on how you say it, right? You know, even though we think of Mercury, Hermes now very much like upper worldy, there's often like statues of Mercury on top of buildings. You know, Hermes actually, even though he's ruled by air in many regards, was also a chthonic deity. So like Hekate, you know, he kind of spanned the worlds. I think, you know, that he had these roles, and certainly in terms of like communication and, you know, Hekate has some aspects that are very mercurial, very swift. You know, she can, many people have had a good swift Hecatean kick in the butt. So I think there's, yeah, I think there's lots in common with Hekate and Hermes, and I think they're very complementary.
Absolutely, yeah.
You know, they're very complementary. You know, not that I'm one kind of for that traditional, we must have a god and a goddess scenario, but I feel like they do have a very kind of complementary energy for many of us. Now, not everyone is going to be kind of involved with Mercury or Hermes, but that some kind of aspect of male divinity that is associated with communication, but also the underworld. You know, like there's others who you could kind of put into that slot, like Lucifer. And you know, that there's something there that I've noticed in a lot of Hecateans is that many of us, not all of us, also have a strong situation with Mercury or Hermes. And I always say that Mercury sits on my left shoulder. And you know, he's just right here all the time. Most of the time it's for good, and sometimes it's, you know, for not good. So
you know, it's funny. It's really interesting to me to see it from the other side, because I, as you are a Hecatean, I will say probably I'm a Mercurian, if that's the word. God, Mercury came to my life in a very amazing way that goes for another video chat. But you know, Mercury and all the gods and goddesses of communication, because of what I do. Tarot reader, communicator, priestess, and then podcaster. And it's very similar, because working with Mercury, Hecate comes around like, you know, she's come around a couple of times like, hey, I have a message for your client. I'm like, hi, Hecate, you know, and but I'm not directly working with her. And it's just, to me, it's so amazing how she comes around and she knows to whom, right, to say, like, this is a message for your client, so make sure you tell your client, sign Hecate. It's just
Signed Hekate.
to me it has been it has been such an amazing such an amazing experience, you know, and to see it from the other side, you know, being a Mercury devotee and have Hecate show, you know, as a ways of communicator as well.
you know, one thing I think that I'm thinking of now, that, and just kind of bringing together what Chris was saying and what you're saying, it's like if we think of the planets, like we think Mercury is very close to us, and Mercury is very quick and mercurial. And then if we think of like the asteroid, the star Hecate, which is further out, even past like Pluto and, you know, those other stars. And it's almost like if you see the arrangement of the stars, you know, that Mercury is an energy that is often very close to us. And Hecate is almost like she's got a big orbit, but sooner or later she's going to orbit close to Mercury and close to us because of her orbit. So I really find the whole cosmological associations really interesting. And, you know, and I think the physicists will catch up with us someday, Chris, to circle back to what you said.
I hope so, because I get so excited. So, like, there is a magician who I know, and I've taken his classes, and I love him to death. However, he said, so I believe that if if a person really wants to learn about the different facets of a magical, like the energies of it, but to have a basic understanding of astro and quantum physics. And he says, and I love him to death, but he disagrees with me. He goes, no, don't do that. That's stupid. I'm like, no, but science is cool. So, but that's just me. I mean, you know, I'm a geek at heart, so whatever.
Well, I think the really cool thing is like if we look at something like energetic healing, for example, like quantum touch, you know, which I was trained in, and you know was more accepted, say, in a hospital setting than like Reiki going back quite a few years now, right? So, and now we see, of course, like there's more evidence from the scientific community saying, oh yes, energetic healing is a thing. Or if we look at meditation, and if we look back 50 years ago, everyone was like, oh, meditation, that's just something that hippies and Buddhists do. And now we see mainstream science saying, yes, getting still in your mind is very important. So I always think that, you know, it's like, you know, I'm a psychologist by training, and psychology is always trying to catch up with what we know in mystical paths or traditions. You know, they're always trying to catch up. So, you know, I think understanding where science is thinking now is really helpful in beyond being just interesting, that it helps us to see the similarities in it all, you know. And I think that is like really such a huge part of maturing into your witchcraft, is that you start to see all the similarities, and it stops being about science is over here and science is wrong. Well, of course science isn't perfect, nothing is perfect. Or, you know, this is over here and that's wrong, and you know my path is the right path. As you mature and claim those keys and keep them, you start to really become a student of the similarities.
That's cool.
And that's something I see with a lot of my students as they really progress, is, you know, they start to see this theory about this quantum theory is actually not that different. And when we talk about, I don't know, something like Neil deGrasse Tyson and his work on dark matter and black holes and whatnot, and I can see that in a very practical scientific lens, but also in a very mystical lens. And when I say, you know, like we went to this thing with him a few years ago in New York City, and afterwards I was like, so it's this is it. Hekate is the stars and she is the darkness.
Oh.
And now we are starting to look at the darkness in a serious grown-up way in terms of science, and understand that the darkness is as important as the light. So to me, it's like science is catching up with us. Someone's finally paying attention to the dark spots in the sky. Besides all of us who are very, you know, who are wanderers, who study the night sky, you know, in a very kind of magical way. It's like, of course, the darkness is just as important. The whole, you know, so I don't know. I like science. I guess maybe I'm a geek too. I love science.
Yay! I love it.
All three of us.
We have a lot of these discussions in our house. Both of my sons are very into science, you know, very into astronomy. And, you know, we bring astrology and astronomy together, and it's really interesting. And we can all learn by it. You know, I think that's really, you know, like that's what we need. We need more dialogue. We need less siloing.
That's awesome. Okay, so I have to ask, let's talk about Hekate and the ghosts and the lost souls, because as you probably already know, that is near and dear to my heart. So I'm one of those people who my whole life, I never would say I was psychic, but I've always felt the dead close to me, and that's always been a big part of my life. However, a lot of my healing training is of psychopomp work and helping the dead cross over and things like that. I have to tell you, when I was reading your books, and I was learning about how the souls who aren't allowed through the gates of Hades, she takes care of them. Oh my God, simply for that alone, I'm sold. Because it's not, at least how I see it, isn't like, Hecate takes the lost souls, blah. It's about being caring and nurturing and taking care of people who need her. So I wanted to just get your thoughts on all of that. And I don't even have a question per se. I just want to hear you speak about it.
Well, this is so fascinating. And, this is something that I believe that all witches, like, we all have different natural abilities, different traits that we're born with. And some of us are really connected to the departed, to the world of spirits, in terms of perhaps people who once knew flesh but now walk in the spirit world, and so on. And but I believe a lot of us get so programmed to fear this that we get freaked out by it, because we've been told that it's fearful, that communicating with the departed is wrong, so on, it's dangerous. Maybe some of those people that Laura was talking about earlier, shouting curses and saying Hecate's on my side, so don't want to, you should fear her. And I think a lot of us have been told that we should fear the dead too, and the departed. And this is certainly something that comes up a lot, with my students, is that they've had these experiences, and it can be frightening because of our programming and because it's different. And I do feel like a lot of us are deeply connected to the departed, and particularly to what's sometimes called the restless dead.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that a few really in particular, really special students of mine, like all during the COVID crisis, have been doing psychopomp work and had really, intense psychopomp altars, and have really felt called to do this work, which is really serious, and can take a toll on us, because it's a lot. Like, it's like any really a job that comes with a lot of responsibility, right? Like, there's a lot to doing this kind of work. So, during COVID, this has been a huge thing for many. I know many of us witches, we've really felt the confusion and the heaviness of those who died from COVID, because and because we're so sensitive to their impressions, their signatures, as they try to find their way to Hecate or Hermes or one of us who will help point them in the right direction. So historically, of course, you brought up that that those who were denied access to the underworld for whatever reason, Hades was in a mood. I don't know, there was some archaic law that said such and such, these things, and that they really became her horde. Like her horde were spirits who were restless. And in particular, they were often, like I mentioned early, those who'd been ostracized by society, because of course, when people tell stories of Hades, they're telling it, as a teaching, and they often these stories are about maintaining social order, right? So
right.
You were an unwed mother who died in childbirth, well, there was a lesson being taught in that story that was told, right? So Hecate was collecting these souls and taking, like you said, and taking good care of them. And at the same time, we also have to consider that whether it's us as individual psychopomps, or if we're exploring Hecate's mythos, for lack of a better word, that she is loving and kind and accepting, but she's also Bobora Forba, the filth eater. You
Mm,
know, that she's also had that particular role in the underworld, where it was associated with getting rid of the waste and the guck and the bullshit.
right.
Um, so her, she's a good mother, and good mothers deal with the messes of life, right?
Mm,
You know, and so I believe, like, if we do psychopomp work, that it's not just our job to be loving guides. It's also our guide to help spirits cast off what potentially is chaining them to this life, and
mm-hmm.
preventing
Right.
them from transitioning to the other side so they can ultimately be reincarnated again. So I really find, that the energy of Bobora Forba, the filth eater, is something that's really helpful for witches as they learn to stand in their own power. And also for those who are called to psychopomp work, is just to remember, that you're the filth eater. And you also sometimes, have to be Brimo, the terrifying one, and put up your boundaries about what you're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
Not judging the departed, but you also have to have
Right.
firm boundaries. It's a really fascinating calling to have, to be a psychopomp. And I mean, I can't remember a time in my life when the dead weren't with me. When people are like, oh, I want to be a psychopomp, I want to communicate with spirits, it'd be like, I've spent decades trying not to, but good for you
Right.
if you want to, if
Right.
learning how not to be in communion with the departed. So I don't know, is that the same for you, Chris?
Oh my, forgot when I was like, I can remember when I was like 3, like 2 or 3. I remember this, and I can't. Like I was sitting in front of the front door, and the front door had a window, and I saw a spirit as plain as day wave at me. And ever since then, and I'm like 2, and how I remember, I think it's because it scared the crap out of me as a 10-year-old. It like imprinted that memory in my head. But ever since, and again, I've always felt them near. Same time, though, when like in like when you're a teenager and your friends are like, let's hang out in the graveyard. It'll be cool and scary. I'm like, I feel not so relaxed here. I'm going to take a nap here in the graveyard. I mean, in fact, we, a friend of mine's a professional photographer, and he was taking some long exposure frames of the stars. And so he was like, the only place we can go in this town that doesn't have city lights is the graveyard. So I'm there, I'm talking to spirits. Next thing I know, my friend, he pats me on the arm and goes, hey, wake up. You fell asleep on someone's grave. And I'm like, because it's so relaxing there for me and so comfortable. Like the dead don't feel like they don't feel like they're dead to me. They just feel like you don't have a body, and that's how I see it. So this whole aspect of Hekate and for taking care of these spirits, it just what gets me in the heart, because I anyone who's ever been oppressed, I think, or have been bullied or whatever, we know what it's like to be on the other side of the gate. And so when you have a deity such as Hekate who says, you know what, that's okay. I'm not going to judge you. I don't care what you did. Hang out with me. Yeah, I'll take care of you. I mean, that's a cool goddess. You have to admit, like I think that's almost everything. Like a lot of people are like, oh, it's about, her mysteries is about that. For me, it's about her taking care of her own. And I think that's really special.
And one other thing that I think is really special, and like kind of unique to Hecate, but certainly also like we see it with Artemis and Diana, is like you said, like it's like this universal acceptance. It's like this come as you are, and and there's a recognition, that, oh, you're one of mine, you're one of the wild ones.
Mm-hmm.
It's all good, that it's good, and You know, I accept you as is, and, you know, come along with me, and, you know, follow my torches, and I'll lead you to where you need to go,
Yeah.
if you follow me. I mean, I think, like you said, with the anyone who's been oppressed, it really is like the journey, you know,
Yeah.
and to me, the journey is like, that's the mysteries. You know, the mystery is like the journey of this life. And as we get deeper into understanding, you know, that like understanding the oneness, like that we are magic, that the universe is within us, you know, that we're born of the stars, just the way Hekate was born of the stars and darkness, so are we. And I just think that's really, really beautiful. And it's really potentially, you know, different than I think some different being the gods and goddesses. You know, that you don't really have to do one specific thing. There's no like Hecate to-do list, and if you do this wrong, she's going to smite you down. Um, you know, like there's none of that kind of business. You know, it's just like sincerity, authenticity, healing, um, generally being reasonably ethical. You know, it's not, we don't have to, you don't have to get things, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, I'm not an expert on obviously all the deities in the world, but it's just been my observation over the past 30 years.
So
And you
that's
know,
an interesting thing. One of the things I talk about in all of my teachings is how I've been initiated to like several different traditions from tradcraft to neo-paganism to shamanism to Reiki, ceremonial, golden, like a whole bunch of things. And a lot of people, and it's changing now, it's changing. However, 25 years ago, you had to do the ritual exactly how it's said in the book. You had to say these words at this time, at this tempo. You had to light this candle and say this. And I do teach all of my students, if you're doing ceremonial magic, learn the tradition first and then change it. You know, the thing I like about what you're saying and can help you do things in your books and your teachings is do what feels right to you, you know, and that doesn't mean be sloppy and be lazy with your teachings. It just means if you feel for called to use a green candle, then use a green candle. If you don't want to use any for candles at all, that's okay, because Hecate hears you because your heart is open to her, and that's all you need. In fact, I think the most powerful spells I've ever done is when I said, whoever god or goddess or Hecate or Diana, I need this. And it just happened because I follow her, or can I have my own, can I have my heart open? And it wasn't about say this, raise your left hand and do this thing, you know?
you know, something I was gonna say very quickly is that's exactly what turned me off of Hecate like 10 years ago. That when I first started hearing about Hecate, the person that I heard it from was like, it has to be red, it has to be blue, it has to be garlic, it has to be on this night. It cannot be anything other than da da da. And I was like, yeah, not my thing, thank you. And that's why I walk away. But it's great to have your perspective, Cindy and Chris. Um, you know, kind of to like rediscover, in my case, to rediscover and to be enamored by her and not necessarily be afraid or be imposed, you know?
Well, I think what is happening in like we're encroaching on this idea of like God or the goddess being separate and like from us, a goddess being out there somewhere.
Yes.
And this is what I think we're dancing around this idea a little bit in our last, you know, and the things that both of you said. So if goddess is out there, I don't know where she is, but she's out there somewhere. And you know, like we get into like the Abrahamic, you know, ideas that God is here and we must do these things for God this very certain way, or else God will do bad things to us. And I think that for some people, that is their mindset. And it's, not to judge their mindset. It's not a mindset I believe in at all. Because the goddess is within us.
Mm-hmm.
Once we, and when we have been programmed because we were brought up Christian, or we were in some kind of neo-pagan religion that taught us that gods are over here, you're down here, little person, and they're up here and mighty. It takes a lot to overcome this, right? This isn't something that we can just, it's not like taking off your jacket when you come in on a winter's day. It takes a long time. So I don't want anyone to think that if they're still in the throes of overcoming this mind trap, that that you're doing something wrong. You're not doing anything wrong. It's just entertain the idea that the goddess is within you. And entertain the idea that everything that the universe is made of and everything the goddess is, all of that is also within you. Just entertain that idea. Just start to let it, start to sit with it a little bit. Because it can be really hard to go from like what Laura was talking about, right? Like if you don't, like if we're doing, what is that? You're doing the ritual, you got your hands this, and you got to, I certainly teach, certain things like that. And then I say, like you said, Chris, once you learn this, follow your intuition, allow what is within you to speak to you rather than, things being firmly prescribed. I will say this, because I say this, and if my students are listening or watching, they'll be expecting me to say this. The one thing you do have to do is meditate.
Yes, agree. Mm-hmm.
There are
100%. Yep.
limitless ways to meditate, but you need to learn to settle into your own mind and to understand that your thoughts are just thoughts. And because that is where you get into flow. That is where you get into the connection to the sacredness within you and the deeper world. So that's the only thing I ever say. This is the only thing you need to do. I teach 2 basic meditations on the podcast. There's some special ones that are there in addition. You can do it any old way you want to do it. But until you learn to sit with your thoughts and be present with your thoughts and to realize that they are just thoughts and to clear the clutter, like that is, I don't care if you do anything else, meditate. And if you don't want to meditate, if you think you don't have time to meditate, you've got resistance to meditation, then you need to meditate twice a day.
That's right. I agree with you 1,000% because a lot of my students, I get a whole bunch of beginners and I say, okay, the first thing is I'm going to teach you about meditation. So they always start to frown and look sad and deflated. I'm like, no, it's actually the most powerful thing. I do it every day because that's how I talk to my goddess. That's how I talk to the ancestors. I close my eyes, I think of them. I clear my head, exactly just what you said. I get out the clutter and I just open up my heart and I talk to the goddess. And I don't have to have an altar. I don't have to have a candle. I can just sit there and just be with the goddess. And I have to tell you, you might laugh if you're a cat person. So we've been talking about Hekate this whole time. My cat has never, ever been in here during a show, and she's been jumping around going crazy because I'm telling you, she's like Hekate, oh my God, she's going crazy. So I'm like having to grab her so she doesn't jump on the camera. Like she's just so happy. I've never seen her so excited because most of the time she doesn't care, could give a crap. Anyway.
There's witches afoot.
There's all these witches talking about Hekate. Ah! Yeah. Okay.
Well, I'm gonna end up with pets on camera during like Keeping Her Keys events, like the cat and the dog, and because they're drawn to the energy, they can feel the hum. I think we can hear.
So my cat is going crazy. I told you I had to let her out. I was like, get out. I was like, get out. You're driving me nuts. Okay. So we're about at the hour. For any closing statements you wanted to say or anything else you wanted to talk about really quickly before we go?
I caught a quick question in the chat that if I could just have a couple of minutes to address
Oh,
it.
yeah. Take your time.
So I believe the question was about the Eleusinian mysteries, the ritual cycle, the mysteries, Hekate, Demeter, Persephone, these rites that were performed, and what my thoughts are on them. I'll say this: like I teach in the coven in my private network, we follow what's known as the rituals of the sacred cave, and they are both inspired by and kind of based upon the existing research on those mysteries. As much as we can do it, we do everything online, so there's certain things we can't do, but they are very much, the rituals of the sacred cave are very much in the spirit of those mysteries. And I believe that the teachings of those rituals, which we do a releasing ritual, so like a cleansing, a banishing ritual in the fall, then we move on and we do late winter, we do a soul retrieval. So that is the revelation, the calling back, sometimes ancestral work, there's that. And then we do a rebirth cycle. So we do actually follow a very similar structure to what is known in the limited historical records we have about those mysteries. So they are very much, that's the keeping her keys kind of approach to studying those mysteries, because that's what those mysteries were about, right? It was about getting to the place where you understand, that the universe and the goddess is within you, and that you clear the clutter of your mind and you see the deeper world and spirits, and the journey, they went on this journey into this cave. So yes, so I would say I think the question was something about would I ever teach about them, and it's like, matter of fact, I do.
Of course you do. Why wouldn't you? Of course you do.
We just don't call it that. We call it the rituals of the sacred cave.
That's awesome. That's amazing. Laura, did you have any last thoughts or questions or anything before we open up to questions?
All I have to say is thank you so much, Cyndi, for being here today, for sharing your wisdom. Thank you to everybody in the chat. I was trying to say hi and be present there for you so you all don't feel lonely. And no pressure here, but Cyndi, let's be in touch so you can come to my podcast. Thank you so much.
Captive audience.
Of course. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us. I really appreciate it. It's always good to see someone that's on there, that you're on the same wavelength. It's awesome to find that. So thank you.
Well, thank you. It was so nice to connect with you. So
I have to say, Cyndi, I am very impressed. I'm impressed for not only with your books, but your just how you teach, how you talk. I think I can listen to you talk about her forever. So I thank you so much for being on the show. So for brand new people, this is called the Mystic Chat. We're on every other Thursday at 7 p.m. Central time. However, if you miss a show, that's okay because we're on YouTube, we're on Spotify and iTunes. So I'm going to stop the recording and we can all hang out real quick.